Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're up and running for the recording with God's blessing, I hope. Wonders of technology. So we are moving along in the narrative of the patriarchs. If you've blinked since we hit Simchat Torah, you might have missed it. But we are just tripping our way through the generations. So we learned last week, both together as well as during the services, that this week comes the big reunion. We saw Jacob leave when he was a young man, and he had gone through the trouble with his brother. We'll just leave it diplomatically. And then he had fled, and he went to Lavan, and Lavan tricked him, and he ended up marrying two women, each with their own handmaidens. Now, between the four of them, we've got 13, well, we have 12 kids. We're going to get Benjamin a little bit later. To flee as well, and now he's back on the border of the land of Canaan, which means he can't go back to his father-in-law's house, and forward means confronting his brother. Tricky. Yes? Yes. So that's the point where we're going to get. We are going to look at the actual confrontation, the whole scene where he is wrestling with an angel. We've studied before, but I advise you to review it again. Whether it's an angel or not is part of the study, but with a limp to meet Esau. And that's where we're going to pick up. And that's on chapter 33, which is page 203 in the Eitz Chaim. Chapter 33 of Genesis, if you're looking in a different edition. So what sort of emotions do you imagine Jacob might be feeling at this point?
He'd be scared.
A little fear.
I would think so, yes.
Right? I mean, do you remember what we heard about Esau's approach from all the messengers?
Oh.
Is it just Esau showing up?
No, he has a huge army.
Yeah, he's got like 400 guys armed.
And he swore when Jacob left, he said, I'm going to kill him.
The last he knew was his brother wanted him dead.
Right.
So this is a tense moment. And even though he is reassured that God will protect him and has that confidence, being confident that God will protect you and walking into the line of fire, it's very hard to still do. But he will. And so that's where we're going to pick up with that sort of emotional setting. So our designated reader, you still up for it?
I'm still up for that.
Okay.
Let's go for it. Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming, accompanied by 400 men. So he divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maids, putting the maids and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last.
All right, a quick explanation as a digression. Why is he doing this?
He's protecting them from the army, but it seems like he's protecting Rachel and Joseph the most by putting them behind.
Exactly. If you've got something valuable, you put it behind a barrier. In this particular case, the walls are the rest of his family. So yeah, he has staged it so that should a catastrophe happen, Rachel and Joseph would have the best chance of running away and surviving. Okay, might not be the best move, as we're going to see. That sort of treatment of Joseph is going to come back to have some repercussions with the family dynamic, but we're not there yet.
And the favoritism he has shown to Joseph, which, if I understand correctly, God sort of didn't understand people well enough and showed favoritism with Cain and Abel, which didn't work out very well. And we still have that theme of favoritism.
God didn't show favoritism. God showed honesty that what Cain had offered wasn't as good as what Abel had offered. It wasn't that he liked Abel better. Tried harder. I mean, it's like you don't complain, well, I don't understand. The teacher gave Bob an A, but he gave me a C. I guess the teacher just likes Bob more. Like, no, Bob studied. Bob did the work. Yeah, exactly. He practiced so hard, it was like the information was in his head. It's a completely different way of cheating. Rather than having it written on his hand. Right? So it's not exactly God picking favorites. But in this particular case, we definitely do see favoritism, which of course Jacob knows the danger of favoritism because he's currently facing down his brother over an issue of favoritism. that repetition and continuation of family problems from one generation to another, not unique to our biblical forefathers. You may know either from your own family or from other families that oftentimes certain issues will become repeated in family narratives. That there will be certain cycles of behavior that are unique to that family that get played out over and over and over, generation after generation after generation, unless someone says, nah, we're not going to do this anymore.
I wonder if Jacob has learned something, because Jacob's original lie to his father was to lie as to which was the older brother and which was the younger. And then when he gets to Laban, Laban lies to him as to which is the older sister and which is the younger.
Right.
So I'm going to read now to see if Jacob has learned something.
Well, he's definitely learned
his
some,
fault.
But he's not perfect.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother, and to greet him.
So imagine for a moment, you're bowing in front of your brother, and this guy that you last heard hates you and wants to kill you is running at you. Right.
Right. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept.
All right. That's like a very surprising outcome, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And a very powerful one. I mean, he's weeping and they're kissing. And I mean, who are you and what'd you do with my brother? I thought you wanted to kill me. All right, so let's keep going.
Looking about, he saw the women and the children. Who, he asked, are these with you? He answered, the children with whom God has favored your servant. Then the maids with their children came forward and bowed low. Next, Leah with her children came forward and bowed low. And last, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed low.
So family introductions and trying to show, yes, we are all submissive before you.
What do you mean by all this company which I have met?
So a quick reminder, Jacob had been sending emissaries with gifts to intercept Esau on his way. Basically try and, placate what he thought would be his brother's wrath.
He answered, to gain my Lord's favor. Esau
They were bribes.
Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours. But Jacob said, no, I pray you, if you would do me this favor, accept from me this gift. To see your face is like seeing the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please accept my present, which has been brought to you, for God has favored me, and I have plenty. And when he urged him.
All right. Is this a little boy? Is this Esau that we remember? I've got enough.
Yeah.
I don't need that. Right? Remember, Esau was furious that his blessing had been stolen. And he asked, is there anything left for me, when he was begging to his father for a blessing? Now, rather than begging for something, for more, rather than fearing that Jacob had taken everything from him, here comes Jacob ready to just dump a load of wealth upon him. And Esau's first reaction, I got it. That's okay. I don't need it. It's like, wow, this is amazing. But Jacob keeps pressing him until he finally goes ahead and accepts it from him. So he does eventually take the sheep and the wealth and all of that. But he seems to be a very different person. Yes?
But we understand that Jacob is also very different, because originally he was trying to steal this all from Esau.
Originally he took an awful lot.
And now he's saying, I want to give it to you. I don't want to take any more from you. And so he's apologizing as well.
Right, so what are they fighting over? Like almost as though they both ended up with plenty, even though they had been fighting over a little. And it's rather odd. Okay, but there's still some lingering issues, as we're going to see in the next few verses.
And Esau said, let us start on our journey, and I will proceed at your pace. But he said to him, my Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the flocks and herds which are nursing are a care to me. If they are driven hard a single day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord go on ahead of his servant, while I travel slowly, at the pace of the cattle before me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir.
Okay. So what's the option? Hey, we can all go together. And Jacob's response? Nah, you go on ahead. We'll catch up because, you know, we got all the kids and the animals. We'll slow you down. We'll slow you down. Well, I thought they'd reconciled. I mean, this kind of sounds like he's weaseling out of spending time with his brother. No? Yes? Or you think it's just a perfectly legitimate concern?
Nice, because Esau has 400 other guys with him also, and maybe he really needs to get back to where he's going.
We don't want you and your brutes to have to linger with us.
To go so slowly can be like not so interesting.
True. But read the next paragraph.
Then Esau said, "Let me assign to you some of the men who are with me.
I'll give you a bodyguard, at least I can do."
But he said, "Oh no, my Lord is too kind to me." He started back that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed on to Sukkot and built a house for himself and made stalls for his cattle. That is why the place was called Sukkot.
And just read the beginning of the next sentence.
Jacob arrived safe in the city of Shechem.
Okay. So, excuse me.
Yeah.
Where were they headed before? Where was Esau headed?
They were going to Seir.
Seir, which is in Edom, which is the territorial land of Esau and the Edomites. So, the land that his descendants will inherit and have. Where does Jacob end up? In Canaan, right? Sukkot and then Shechem, which is not Seir.
So he's still lying to his brother? Jacob still hasn't learned not to lie?
Well, lying, placating, being diplomatic.
But if Esau gets to his place and now starts waiting for his brother and his brother doesn't show up and doesn't... I mean, that's...
I thought my brother was right behind me.
Yeah,
exactly.
all these lambs
that he gave me.
Yeah.
Jacob still seems to be saying, I don't trust you. There's no future with us together. Right? I am happy and I'm relieved that you're not a murderous brute, but I am still going to do what I can to A, make a public gift to you so that if you retaliate against me, it will make you look bad. This is tribute, and if you attack the person who gave you tribute, then people don't take that well when other people might consider giving you tribute. And B, I'm not going to actually live with you. It would be problematic. But this is really unusual. I mean, why is he so suspicious of his brother still? His brother, by all accounts, is totally different, right? Isn't he?
Well, how long has Jacob had to make that determination?
I mean, as long as it took for him from reaching the border to see him coming with 400 armed men.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. But everything he's seen since his brother arrived has been gracious and noble.
Yes, but he's been gracious and noble too, and he knows he's lying about it.
Yes. So one of the things that's very true is the more you lie, the less you trust other people.
Well, I think so. I think that's what's going on here.
Because if I'm a liar, then why wouldn't he be a liar? Separate way, and we don't see them reconcile. We don't see them reconcile again. And Israel and Edom, the two nations, as we talked about before, remain distant from one another, still calling each other brother, but having a very rocky relationship for the next 1,000 years.
Cold peace.
A cold peace. Yes. Suspicion.
Oh, yeah.
That suspicion prompts commentary. And when we get commentary, we have something we can study.
Jacob's, you'll excuse this apologizing, but Jacob is still feeling guilty for what he did. And then projecting that onto Esau as part of Esau's anger.
If someone had done to me what I did to him, I would still be furious, and I would not let that person go without punishing them. Therefore, my brother Esau must be doing exactly the same, and I don't want to be there when that blows, so let me be separate. Very possible. Very possible. But that suspicion has crept into Judaism in general. Talk about that suspicion of why are they being so nice? Exactly, has crept in. And so we're going to look at, first a few comments on this in particular, but then more general comments about how we relate to non-Jews. Because if you remember from 2 weeks ago when we did Toldot, we talked about of Edom. And we talked how it's not just Esau and not just the nation of Edom, but it also became a byword for the nation of Rome, and then later in the Middle Ages became a byword for the religion of Rome, meaning the Catholic Church, the empire of Catholicism. So whenever you see a story about Esau or Edom, remember that for most of Jewish history, we've been reading that not just about the narrow geographical location, but it's often been read as a morality tale about non-Jews in general, in particular, non-Jews who have a tendency to oppress us, like the Roman Empire and the Catholic Empire. So with that in mind, more sense.
And one more thing, turn to page 204. At the top of the page, the word there has some little dots and things on top of it.
I was going to get there.
Oh, okay.
That's our first comment, so we might as well say it now. I like to do it as a surprise. But so at the top of page 204, in the real Sefer Torah itself, as well as in our own Chumash, you'll notice that the word at the top, that's what is it, the third word, has dots over the letter.
Yeah. Why?
And why? Read the comment. Right, that's what the dots are. That's what the dots are over. Yes.
There are dots above the word. There is a difference of opinion concerning this matter. There are those who explain these dots as saying that he did not kiss him wholeheartedly.
Right. So the idea is that this wasn't a real kiss. So it'd almost be the equivalent in modern day of saying he kissed him.
Oh.
Yeah, it wasn't a real kiss. This wasn't like he had a real affection. That he was kind of sort of insincere about this show of affection, right? Again, we're reading the suspicion that, is this really Esau? No, Esau wouldn't do that. So therefore, there must be something else going on here. And then there's an alternative reading.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, it is a rule that it is common knowledge that Esau hates Jacob, but his pity was aroused at that moment, and he kissed him wholeheartedly.
Right, so Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, it was an honest kiss, even though Esau is still terrible. So notice the common thread, right? In both commentaries, Esau is terrible, but in one of them he's terrible and deceitful, and in the other he's terrible. He dropped his pen. But for a moment, he had a flash of sincere emotion and pity for his brother who was groveling in the dirt before him. But in both cases, Esau is bad.
Was Jacob sincere in his groveling in the dirt before him, or was he just trying to diffuse his anger?
Yes.
I mean, Jacob was not looking to take anything from Esau. Jacob was not looking to defeat Esau. He was looking to diffuse Esau. So when he was groveling in the ground and bowing and calling him my servant, or I am your servant, that is the way you diffuse a despot and a dictator and an armed man. Now Esau's responding by trying to say, hey, I'm not that terrible. You're my brother. It's okay. But the commentators aren't buying it. All right? They're saying this kiss was neither not sincere, or it was sincere, but only for the briefest of instants that he have that brotherly love. But really, he is still a terrible guy. But what's so bad about Esau, right? I mean, again, like we saw when we were first trying to identify, why the theft of the birthright and everything back in the day, we also had a rough time with how Esau was being characterized so negatively. And do you remember what we discussed as being one of the reasons why the later rabbis would retroactively paint Esau with a fairly dark brush? I've already hinted at it earlier.
Rome descended from Esau.
Exactly. Right. So talking badly about Esau was a way to talk badly about Edom, the later kingdom, and badly about Rome, and badly about the Catholic oppression. And therefore, much of the vitriol over Esau was code for their anger with the oppressors that they were living under. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily.
Commentaries were written; they were retroactively Esau.
So that's where we get into a little bit more of a metaphysical quandary of, did the sages who criticized Esau truly believe that Esau was worthy of that criticism, or did they believe that this was a useful cover for making criticism explicitly about these oppressive regimes without getting explicitly crucified or thrown on a pile of fire. So not they really honestly believe that about Esau, but they certainly believed it about their current relationships with their brothers who were oppressing them. And that retroactivity is a little bit more cloudy. But how far did they go in their mistrust, in their distrust, and in their anger with their local people, with the local oppressor? Oh.
I read the commentary
Mm-hmm.
Before the word Vayishlach with the dots.
Yep.
And some commentaries are saying that when Esau ran towards Jacob and he fell on his neck,
Yes.
that he didn't actually wanted to kiss him, he wanted to bite him.
Correct.
And that's why they came up with this word.
Right.
He wasn't sincere.
Right. But again, falling upon his neck text seems to only mean that he was hugging him, dearly. The commentators say it wasn't a hug, it was a bite. He was like a vampire, going for the throat because he's like an animal. And again, it's like, why are we so harsh on Esau? Right? Why?
Is it the same root though, to kiss and to bite?
No,
They're so similar that they could almost be confused.
They could, I suppose, yeah.
Similar.
Yeah.
One is a chaf and one is a.
Right. Yeah. So I suppose,
There's
it's
also play on that. Was it a typo? Was
was it a typo? Well, the rabbis aren't going to say it was a typo. But again, if they could read it in a negative way on Esau, and if they can make that pun in a way that makes him even more blatantly aggressive, then they will do so. But his words, his behavior, he's not biting anyone. Lets them go. He offers to not take all the stuff that's being given. I mean, he does not seem like a bad guy.
Not to belabor this too much, but think about the relationship between the commentators and the Roman Empire at the time. It was a kiss and a bite, in fact.
Oh,
Okay, hold on that comment.
Okay.
Wait for 2 seconds. We're going to read the next thing, and then I want you to say exactly what you're about to say. Because I think it's going to come exactly in line with what you're preparing to say. But I want to let the rabbi speak first.
Rabbi Judah commenced and said, "What beautiful things this nation does.
Meaning Rome.
They organize markets, repair bridges, set up bathhouses."
Would that be considered the kiss?
Yeah.
Right? When Rome came, they did do many constructive and beneficial things. Anybody who's ever seen Life of Brian may remember the very famous scene, what's Rome ever done for us? And someone says, built the roads, the law and order, the aqueducts, the viticulture, yes?
Hello, anybody drive a Lincoln?
It's not mine.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that the alarm going
That was
off?
the alarm. Oh,
It was ours. I stopped it.
Okay.
I heard it, but I looked. I didn't see the lights. Oh, I looked at the wrong
Thank you.
car. They're all silly little gray cars out there. I'm looking for the wrong car.
Hit it.
Yeah, right.
It's a heavy acorns. All right. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rome's done some really nice stuff for us.
Rabbi Yossi kept quiet.
Right? Meaning, I'm not going to say anything. I can't believe he just said something so stupid, but I'm not going to say anything.
Bar Yochai responded and said, "Yeah, but whatever they set up only for their own convenience. Sure, they organize markets, but that's places for their whores. Bathhouses to preen themselves in. Bridges to collect tolls."
All right. So what's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's position?
Right.
What? It's not a kiss. It's a bite.
It's a bite. Right.
Did you want to add more to that, or is that pretty much spot on what you were
I
thinking?
covered my thoughts pretty
The
well.
rabbis, I thought they might. See, you and the rabbis, you're of one mind. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying any of the good that we think we're seeing from this nation is really a concealed form of wickedness, a concealed form of evil. Any kiss is actually bad because it's for their purposes, not for the general good. And if to make the point, the story continues.
Judah ben Gad went and reported what they had said, so the government heard about it. They said, Judah, who promoted us, will be promoted. Yossi, who shut up, will go into exile to Sepphoris. Shimon, who badmouthed us, will die.
Right, so the Romans, well, they did kind of act exactly the way that you might expect a horrible oppressor to do, which is if somebody is a sycophant, then we will promote them because, hey, they're a sycophant. And if someone doesn't defend us, well, we'll teach them a lesson and they can go into exile. And if someone actively criticizes us, then they will be under a death sentence. This is when Shimon Bar Yochai and his son go into hiding in a cave for years. And there's a whole long story that comes out of that, but not for today. But
this is reminiscent back in the time of the Greeks. They did the same kind of thing. They built bathhouses and gymnasia. They tried to bring the Hellenized the Jews.
sounds a little similar to the story of Hanukkah, you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Right. And it was all for our own good. It was about bringing civilization. And in some cases, it was. I mean, bathhouses were fairly helpful things. Having good marketplaces were helpful things. Bridges, that is a helpful thing. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying, but they didn't build them to be helpful. They built them for nefarious purposes that only coincidentally happen to be helpful. So there's no good they can't do that isn't actually evil. But there's no good they could do that wouldn't in fact be evil. That's his position. And if you want to hear that driven home more powerfully, we keep reading, this time from Baba Batra.
So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to his disciples, my sons, what is the meaning of scripture? Righteousness exalts a nation, but the kindness of the peoples is sin.
All right, so it's a confusing phrase from Mishlei, from the book of Proverbs. Right, that this, chesed le'umim chet, that the kindness to the kindness of the people, of the nations, le'umim, is a chatat, rather, is a sin. Awkward phrase. And so he wants his students to explain it, expound upon this. What does this mean? But before we hear their answers, contextualize. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who is he? Give me one of the more important features of his life story. Do I have to go into the sermon about him again? He's one of my favorite guys, people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is he the one that had the Torah scroll wrapped around?
No,
That was Akiva.
not Akiva. That was Tarfon, I believe. But that was during the martyrdom of the Bar Kokhba revolt, which happened about 70 years after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Yochanan ben Zakkai, the rabbi who was in Jerusalem during the time of the Roman siege of Jerusalem, just before the destruction of the Second Temple, during the Great War against Rome. And he pled with the Zealots who had forced the war to surrender. And the Zealot leader, who was his relative, said, I can't surrender because if I surrender, the other Zealots will kill me. And this is kind of the problem with extremists, right? You climb up a certain height and there is no backing down because the people below you will kill you for betraying the Zealot cause. And so he said, well, I've got to escape the city then so I can plead with the Romans so that this won't happen. And so he sneaks out of the city in a coffin. They say that he has died and they carry him out because there's no burials in Jerusalem. Then there's the whole thing about whether they're going to shove the spear through the coffin. It's a great story. And he goes and he pleads with the commander of the Roman forces. And the commander of the Roman forces says, Jerusalem will fall. We are going to burn this city to the ground. And he says, well, at least give me Yavne and her scholars. Give me the city and allow me to set up a Beit Midrash there, a school. And allow us to continue Judaism, even if Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And the Romans said, okay. So that's the time period that he's living in, or we're actually dealing with after the fact. He is somebody who has seen the absolute worst that the Roman Empire has to offer, the total destruction of the city of Jerusalem, her temple, and thousands and thousands of our people. And so he's got that in mind when he's talking to his students. We all set now? Okay.
Rabbi Eliezer answered and said, righteousness exalts a nation. This refers to Israel. As it says in Samuel, who is like your people Israel, one nation in the earth? But the kindness of the peoples is sin. That means all the acts of charity and mercy that the idolatrous nations do is a sin for them, for they do it only for their own self-aggrandizement. It says they may offer sacrifices of a sweet savor to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and of his sons.
All right, so why are they doing good things?
For themselves.
For themselves. So therefore, the good things they do, they're sins. They might as well be sinning. Right? The good that they do isn't good. The good that they do is simply a way of trying to manipulate the world for their own evil purposes. So any goodness you ever see them doing, any chesed, any kindness, is kindness. Put dots over that word. He might as well be biting you in the neck if you think he's actually being kind. Little rough? Yeah. This is not the first text that we lead off in the interfaith discussion groups with. Okay? But we're going to keep moving.
Rabbi Joshua answered and said, righteousness exalts a nation. This refers to Israel, who is like your people Israel, one nation in the earth.
All right, we all seem to agree that the first part, Israel is when it's being righteous.
But the kindness of the peoples is sin. All the acts of charity and mercy that the idolatrous nations do is a sin for them, for they do it only to prolong their dominion.
And then he brings a proof from Daniel, I believe this one is from. Yes.
Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you, and break off your sins by righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, so there may be a lengthening of your tranquility.
All right. And what Daniel is saying there, according to the sages, is that last clause, so there may be a lengthening, undermines everything in front of it. Right? The only way that Daniel could convince the king to be a decent human being was by promising that by acting decent, as opposed to really being decent, his kingship would last longer. This is Machiavellian. Right? You have to show some pity and mercy to the poor, because otherwise they'll revolt. Not because they're human beings, not because they deserve it, but because it's in your best interest to be merciful or pitiful right here. But generally speaking, you don't need to worry about actually having those emotions. You don't have to worry about being a nice person. Just do what you need to do that we call kindness, but you'll do it because it extends the reign of your tyranny. And therefore, kindness. It's not real kindness. Make sense? Are we thinking, is this too rough? Is just this not fair? I mean, is this like, criticizing the Soviet Union when it would give out money to third world nations because, all they were trying to do was promote their rule in those other countries? Well, yeah. And weren't they? I mean, was the Soviet Union particularly interested in who was starving where? Or were they interested in being able to establish a foothold to try and spread their particular form of dominance across the world? What about the United States?
Blankets to Indians.
What's that?
Blankets to Indians.
Well, I mean, in the United States history, we have direct acts of things that weren't even kindness, like blankets that had the smallpox virus already in it as a deliberate form to infect them. So that wasn't even pretending to be kind. I mean, the Indians might have thought it was kind for a moment, but anybody who reads that from an objective point of view, with all the facts, would not consider that kindness. But when the United States rushed in to defend the poor Texans, was it doing it because it really just wanted to help the poor Texans, or was it doing it because it wanted to take the territory away from Mexico? Is this what governments always do? Which is maybe talk about kindness and mercy and goodness, but do what strategically they believe is important for their dominion.
Isn't that why they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts completely? Because if you have the power over somebody, that's what you're saying. You can be nice in order to get that power, and then once you have it,
why do you need to be nice anymore?
Why do you need to be nice?
Right? Which means that being nice was never an actual value. It was never an opinion. And that niceness of you was in fact the equivalent of a sin, because you were doing something horrible just under the blanket of being nice.
Pirkei Avot
Mhm.
talks about this. It says, do not trust the government.
Don't trust the government.
Government, yeah.
Yeah, do
Because
not
when
come
they need
close.
you,
Yes.
They need you, they're very nice to you, but when they don't need you, they kick you in the butt. That's it.
I think the Aramaic might have been a little different, but but something very close to that. Yes, exactly. It's rough, though, to read this, to say that any good that you see these nations doing is, in fact, for ulterior and evil motives. Let's push it a little bit further, though.
So Rabbi Gamliel answered and said, righteousness exalts a nation. This refers to Israel, who is like your people Israel, one nation in the earth. But the kindness of the peoples is sin. All the acts of charity and mercy that the idolatrous nations do is a sin for them, for they do it only to put on airs, and whoever puts on airs is thrown into Gehenna.
Right, whoever acts haughty and proud.
The proud and haughty man, scorner is his name. He works in wrath of pride, and wrath is Gehenna.
As we know from Zephaniah.
A day of wrath is that day.
Okay, so we've got three ulterior motives here. We have aggrandizement, we have lengthen the reign, we'll just use the word reign, and then we have heirs, because that's short of the right than haughty. These are three reasons why someone might be kind without actually caring about being kind. Make sense? Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. All of these at the moment are being directed at the Ovdei Kochavim, at the idolaters. Are the idolaters reading the Talmud?
No.
No. Okay. So why are the rabbis teaching this? If we're not going to fix the idolaters, if we're not going to get them to change their horrible ways, why are the rabbis teaching this then?
Is it to make us aware of what's going on?
Okay, so we've got two reasons. One of them, right, is simply, to break the naive, right, to wake up, right, to not be like Rabbi Yehuda and say, oh, look at all the good stuff that Rome does. Because you should realize the good they do is for their reign in terms of Rome, or in other cases, it's to aggrandize themselves or because they are haughty and prideful, and this makes them look good. Is a way to do a wake-up call, to say what is the real motivation behind why these other nations are doing what they're doing, because it may look like they're being nice, but they're not actually being nice because they're idol worshippers. Don't know how to be nice. That's the implicit criticism here. We'll come back to that in a second. But there's another reason why the rabbis are also teaching us this in the Talmud.
Turn us into cynics.
Well, that's kind of the wake-up part, which the ultimate goal would be to make us cynics. But I'm going to push back that they don't want us to be a cynic. But I sort of already gave it away. Why are the rabbis teaching us Talmud?
So that we won't become idolaters.
Focus on this side.
Don't be that way.
Don't be that way. When you do tzedakah, when you do chesed, are you trying to aggrandize yourself? When you do chesed, are you just trying to keep your position in the community longer so people will let you be on the council of elders or will listen to your opinion or people will owe you a favor when it comes time to make some other decision? When you do tzedakah or chesed, are you doing it just so everybody knows how righteous and pious you are, but not because you actually care about the people you're helping? Right? This is not just an implicit criticism of idolaters. This is another way to criticize our own secondary or primary motivations for how we behave when we are helping people in need. And to say, this is not acceptable. The idolaters, that's all they got. Right? And we're going to come back to that cynicism in a second. But for us, we should be exalted through righteousness, but we are also susceptible to these. Some people, when they do tzedakah, you can certainly feel an ulterior motive or even a primary motive. People who only give tzedakah in order to take care of their tax burden. Not exactly doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because it is economically advantageous to them. We might be hopeful they'll pick the right causes to support, but if there wasn't the economic incentive, necessarily be doing it. For some people, I'm obviously not saying that for everybody, but there are some. Some people will only do it if their name will be written in certain size letters on the side of the building with giant spotlights put on. Some people will only do it as long as they get a recognition and they have the tribute dinners and they have all the ways that everyone will know how special and important and how wonderfully kind they are. And if they were not receiving that recognition, you don't have to be an idol worshiper to fall prey to that, I believe is what the rabbis are trying to say here. And they are trying to say Israel should be better. The nation of Israel should be better. Idolatry is an insidious poison that makes it so that goodness turns bad. But even without idolatry, sometimes we allow our goodness to turn bad. But we're going to have to pull our way out of that cynicism, because I don't want to leave with a completely bad taste in our mouth about the other nations. So onward.
Are we on Rabbi Gamliel?
No, next one, Rabbi Nehunia.
Rabbi Nehunia ben
Hakana.
Hakana answered and said, righteousness exalts a nation and kindness for Israel. For the nations sin, said Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to his disciples. What Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana has said makes more sense than what I have had to say and what you have had to say, since he assigns righteousness and mercy to Israel, but to Gentiles, sin.
All right, so what Rabbi Nehunia did here was he said, rather than breaking the sentence where it naturally breaks, which is righteousness exalts a nation, and kindness for kindness for the nations a sin, what he did was take the kindness and stick the comma after it, right? Righteousness exalts a nation and kindness. For the other nations, sin, right? So what he did was he took even the kindness away from the other nations and left them with only the word sin. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, that's the best one of all, because that way righteousness is reserved wholly for Israel and sin is reserved for the other nations. Some heavy cynicism. That's some heavy bitterness. And it's going to be even more heavy when we read the next passage.
Then that implies that he too had something to say.
Right? He said, that's better than what I was going to say. Well, what was he going to say?
What was it? It is that which has been taught on Tana'it authority. Said to them, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, just as a sin offering atones for Israel, so an act of charity atones for the nations of the world.
So, wait a minute. He read that passage, Chesed le'umim, that the kindness of the nations is like a chatat, a sin offering. It's like a sacrifice. He read that to mean that when they do kindness, it's the equivalent of offering a sacrifice in Jerusalem. That is a means of atonement. That's a means of them being right with God. That's a good thing. Well, why did he change his mind? Why did he do the whole righteousness completely for Israel and sin for the Ovdei Chachavim, for the idolatrous nations? What could possibly have made him change his opinion?
Listen to the other rabbis.
Listening to the other rabbis a little bit? Yeah, how about having your whole nation destroyed by Rome? How about having your temple burnt down? How about having your people carried off as slaves? That kind of leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. And what you used to think, these other people, they're not so bad. You know, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And when they're good, you know, that's a way that they can live and be good. After you've had to escape the city pretending to be a corpse and have to beg just for the right to be able to continue your own faith under this heel of the oppressors, that can change your opinion. That can change your view. And indeed, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we mentioned very early on, his opinions of the Romans was also jaded by the experiences that he had under Roman oppression and occupation. And so we shouldn't be too surprised that there are these voices that are antagonistic. What we should be most surprised at is that there are the counter voices that reach out against these opinions. The most famous of which is the next one on the page.
And that's from the Sanhedrin that says, righteous people of all nations have a share in the world to come.
So this completely undermines the rhetoric of the previous paragraphs. Because the previous paragraph said the righteous people of other nations, they're not righteous, right? They're just sinning in sheep's clothing. But Sanhedrin reads as a law which has been codified and is continued to be taught over and over again, more than these other verses for the last 2,000 years, says no. Those that are righteous among the other nations, they too have a share in the world to come. They too are what we would legitimately call righteous. How do we reconcile this then? The idolatry, right? Idol worshippers. Once someone has fully fallen into the trap of true idolatry, of truly worshiping the work of their own hands and believing it as a power in the universe which can be cajoled and bribed by their sacrifices and their offerings, once someone is like that, then indeed all of the goodness that you may think they have is laced with the arsenic of these other motivations. Idolatry is built upon the premise of I can manipulate and control the world for me and my benefit through this item which I built for me in my image, and I have no constraints upon me, the measure of my goodness. Once you take that step, once you truly turn your mind in that direction, then yeah, why would I be kind just for kindness' sake? I'll be kind because it benefits me, the same way that I'm serving my idol because it benefits me. The nature of idolatry is it twists the direction in which we flow from goodness to badness and badness to goodness. Because once you justify everything within your own hands, then indeed everything is justified by how it benefits you. And when we see true idolatry, we know that there is a fundamental flaw within that mindset. That person can still be redeemed. That person can still lose that idolatry and can still turn to monotheism and away from it. Absolutely, they're not permanently damaged. But while they have that in mind, they lack the capacity to be truly righteous, to truly understand what goodness is and seek goodness for its own sake with no thought of how it benefits them. Thankfully, there aren't as many blatant true idolaters anymore. It is something that has faded from earth quite substantially, but we still have the dust of idolatry, the leftover residue of idolatry in so many ways that we seek to make ourselves the measure of the world. And then we judge the world by how well it meets our needs. And when you begin to get into that mindset, which is sort of the stepchild of idolatry, then all of these things become kind of, well, I'll be good if, and there shouldn't be an if. I'll be good because it's good. But as soon as you make yourself the measure of the world and your wants and your needs and your personal desires as the only way that you are measuring what is right with the world, it has to benefit you. Because you are the standard of what good is. So it's not trying to say that everybody from every nation and every time is horrible. It's saying idolatry is a poison to the world. And even what looks good, if it's been tainted by idolatry, is going to be poisonous in what it is. All right, questions, comments before we get one more text.
I see what they're saying, but it seems to me if you're doing acts of kindness, that's benefiting somebody. Do I really care what your motivations are inwardly? Does it make a difference if you're providing clothes for poor people or food for homeless people and you're doing it because you want your name on the building, but still you're doing good?
So the answer, which gets wrestled with in other parts of the Talmud, is yes, you're still doing good. And indeed, you still would accept the good that someone is trying to do. Right? So if someone says, I'm going to come and I'm going to give $1 million to feed the poor, but only if on every can of food it says, this food given to you by the great and wonderful and kind Mr. Smith, you take the $1 million, you put the labels on the can, and you feed the poor.
Exactly.
But you also have to recognize that what Mr. Smith did was not pure kindness. And that is not the way we are supposed to be motivated to do it. Right? Because if we lose sight of that, use that as, well, that's just the way the world is, right? People are just like that. No one does anything good unless they're getting something from it. So now if I want to ask someone to do good, I'm always going to pitch it. I'm always going to sell it of what this will benefit you. You know, I hear that you're a very wealthy businessman. Perhaps you'd like to help us on this charity project. It would be great PR for your firm. And now we're going to only speak in that language. And when you only speak in that language, then that becomes the only language people think in and the only way people behave. And the rabbis are warning us that that is not acceptable.
On the other hand, if you don't speak in that language, you're not going to get the donations, and the good in the world won't.
If you can't also, people need an external motivation. Yes, but you have to always be recognizing that this external motivation is tainted. It may be better than nothing. And indeed, the rabbis, like I said, argued and come down on the side that, yes, better than nothing is better than nothing. But yeah, it is. You know, we're not going to hold so purely to our ideals that those who are desperately in need suffer. We're not going to say this is as good as it gets, because this is not as good as it gets. Right? This is a very unfortunate mid-level of what we are willing to work with if necessary. But never mistake this for the ideal. Because if you do, then we're lost. We might as well give up, because it will never be able to rise above that. Did you have something?
Yeah, you said be good for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of the Santa Claus is coming to town.
Yes.
So be good for goodness sake.
Oh, not just to bribe Santa Claus.
Right, not just because of the presents. Right. And yet
Very Jewish.
but yet it has to be stated, because it's very easy from that whole mythology, good for the presents. So the song had to stick that in to try and help deaden the effect of that issue. But no, this is not the right way to do it, nor is being good because of Santa Claus. But some people do need that learning. Children especially, they do often need incentives. They do need something they already appreciate to be attached to what you want them to learn to appreciate to help them grow. But you're not supposed to stop there. You're not supposed to stop that moral development, that sense of righteousness at just pandering to their basic nature, while never giving them that higher cause. Right? You may have to settle for them acting only on that base nature, but the higher cause needs to still be stated again and again and again, if not only for them, but for your own sake. Otherwise philanthropy becomes a mercantile act, right? And why would you then want to promote philanthropy? I mean, think, if this is really the only thing that matters, then those people who are helping encourage others to do philanthropy are eventually going to say, right? Because after all, maybe the people who are doing it only for self-aggrandizement, for their own extension of reign and for their own heirs, maybe they're right. Maybe there is no reason in and of itself to help people that are in need. Should I be helping them either? Right? I may not be doing the good for these reasons either, but I may recognize there's no reason to do good at all, because they certainly don't see a reason to do good by itself. Give up too. And that the rabbis are categorically opposed, that we would ever think this is the only reason why we should do good.
How do you separate aggrandizement and so forth from personal gratification?
Well, personal gratification is first and foremost personal. That is to say, if a person feels good for having helped someone in need, as aggrandizement and heirs. Aggrandizement and heirs is where they force others to acknowledge how good they are.
It's sinful if it's a public display, but if you feel good about what you're doing, and you're doing it so you make yourself or your company feel good, that doesn't fall in the same category.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that companies have feelings, but people certainly do.
Some companies seem to have requirements.
Well, and that's a company law, which is, like I said, companies don't actually have emotions. They don't have a soul, despite whatever the Supreme Court may or may not say.
Yeah, there are people who run.
Right, but the people who run absolutely do. And they should feel good about doing good. I mean, the same way that a person should feel good about coming to synagogue, a person should feel good about studying Torah. But as soon as you go out and say, guess how much Torah I studied yesterday? Study as much as me? Well, I guess, not all of us can be saints.
So what I'm asking really is, should the board of United Way
right feel good about
the sinners if they feel good about doing whatever they do.
No,
As a group.
they should feel good about what they do, but they shouldn't go around telling everyone, hey, you have to respect me because of the good that I do. They shouldn't demand the best seats at the opera. They shouldn't demand that parties be thrown in their honor. Now, if someone wants to throw a party, that gets a little bit more difficult. The general consensus is that if a person's behavior is chosen by the community to be used as an example that others would recognize and want to follow, then making a tribute for that person is entirely appropriate. But on the other hand, if the person demands it as a prerequisite before they do good, the good that they want to achieve with the stigma of aggrandizement that goes along with what they're asking. But for the community to say, this person has done a great job and we want more people like that person, we need to hold this example up, that's perfectly permissible for the community to do. And indeed, the community should do. The community should highlight people that are doing good. It's just the people that are doing good shouldn't go around highlighting themselves. That's kind of the tension. All right, and just so that you remember, or can see rather, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai maybe even made steps to reconcile his earlier position with his anger at that particular moment. We're going to finish with one more text.
The story is told that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Yehoshua were walking by the ruins of the temple. Rabbi Yehoshua said, "Woe to us that the place where the atonement for the sins of Israel was made has been destroyed." But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai replied, "Do not be grieved, my son. Do you not know that we have a means of making atonement that is as good as this? Gemilut chasadi, acts of loving kindness, as it is said, for I desire chesed, loving kindness, and not sacrifice."
Which is a quote from the prophet Hosea. So he comes back to this notion after the destruction that chesed is a means of atonement. But here he's using it for Israel because the temple is in ruins. But I think that he's recognizing that if chesed is truly a means of atonement for us, then for those that truly do chesed, those that are not doing it for only ulterior motives, that it truly is a means of them drawing close to God as well. That portal to God is still open even if the temple is in ruins. And I think it's important to recognize the ulterior motives of some, but to also recognize the good motives of many, and to not be completely cynical that everybody is only doing it for ulterior motives, but not be so naive as to imagine that everything that looks good, or that everybody who seems to be an ally on a cause is truly an ally for the same reason, and perhaps maybe an ally for reasons that we would be uncomfortable with if we were to examine it carefully. A delicate balance.
So motivation is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.